Okay. Let's begin our sixth section. And we have now 5 communications. It's a little larger than the precedents. We are going to begin with Aniruddha Mukherjee. I think it's the pronunciation, with a communication with the title L'Objet Invalide. Please.
Hello. I hope I'm clear. Should I share screen? I think I need permission to share my screen.
Oh, I think so. Yes.
Ah, great. All right. I have a little bit of a multimedia problem today, so I'm going to switch between programs a little bit, but should be fine. Yeah. Hello, everyone, again. Thank you for inviting me to the conference, and thank you so much for organizing it. I'm sure it was much more complex given current circumstances. I'm a PhD candidate. My name is Aniruddha Mukherjee. It's just a slightly strange pronunciation, but it works. I'm a PhD candidate at the Institute of Urban Design under Professor Peter Trummer. I've recently begun just a year ago and still figuring out my way through the research. And this particular paper is essentially a continuation of my master's thesis here in Frankfurt at the Stilschule, where I also studied under Peter Trummer. So let me begin. The paper essentially takes the post-structural modes of thinking within architecture. So let's say late 60s to around the turn of the 21st century. And it takes that period, the end of that period, as being at an impasse. This impasse concerns its pursuit of a reformulation of subjectivity through architectural form. The problem, as I have understood it, is the set of originals, meaning urban grids, geometric primitives, traces, and so on that authors consciously select to work with and problematize. And in other words, it's basically what do you begin a design with, or what takes on a meaningful architectural form to begin any kind of design activity. And there are some sort of patterns, or some tendencies during that period that I explored for this paper. For the purposes of this presentation, I will look into the work of only, let's say, 1 or 2 architects, but there's a body of research that is presented in more detail in the paper. My hypothesis here is that the impasse is an opportunity to investigate and reveal the conceptual apparatus of the post-structural aesthetic and its political subjectivity through its originals, and originals that can be thought of on how originals can be thought of today. This presentation, broadly speaking, I have divided into 2 parts: methods of looking into the projects of the time and modes of operation, or how these analyses can be productive in a sense. one of the specific aspects of the discourse that I found as a point of entry was something that was referred to as self-referentiality and difference, which I'm going to try and explain, and I'm still never sure if I get it right myself, but considering this is actually a set of drawings by Daniel Libeskind, and I'm quoting the text by Robin Evans that talks about confronting architectural objects in this drawing where the subject himself or herself is placed as in a kind of a tension where the depth of the drawing and the objects involved are constantly familiar, but at the same time, there is no perceptible architectural space that can be encountered. Another example would be the Wexner Center, where a lot of urban grids are used as devices to not only generate space, which is what grids have been used traditionally before that through the modern period and before, but to turn them into form. So for example, the drawing next on the right shows a kind of a pergola structure or a kind of a structure for facade paneling. And all of that somehow is derived from a 2D virtual grid that is applied onto the drawing. And then to be a little more specific, I'm dealing here with the problem of the identity of an architectural element. In this case, a column that doesn't do what a traditional column does sits there, but it's quite, let's say, difficult to consider it not to be a column because of the context and the system that it is a part of. The visual system, I mean here, not specifically the structural system. So yes, I'm dealing with cognition and interpretation of architectural elements most of the times. And at this point, I actually will go out of architecture for a moment, and I'd like to show you a clip from a play that played in Frankfurt recently. A friend of mine is the director, and I think helps us understand a few things. I hope the sound goes through.
There is no sound, so just, you know.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately not sure how to fix that, but it's not really important. Most of it was in German and a few funny sounds in there, but all right. So now to go to the analysis itself. What I'm calling devices here are simply actually ways of mining real architectural projects, either built or a 3D model in this case, but it is also a built project that would reveal something about why a certain original was chosen by the author, and what that original may look like if represented slightly differently. So it's a bit of a tactical move. And then the second one is trying to mine for figuration to figure out if that particular move can be productive formally at all. So this is the house 6. Just to mention, I've mentioned the text because any kind of mining I will always do through the discourse or the discussion on a project, either by the author or by others about the work. And in this case, I've mentioned an art critic that studies Peter Eisenman's projects and discusses the fact that Eisenman uses a 9-square grid as a base to design a house. Here again, there's the form and the at least back in that time they were dealing with the form content sort of binary, where the 9-square grid stood for I don't know, a lot of Christian church values and a lot of very it symbolized some kind of a traditional set of configurations that were possible within the 9-square grid. And before he takes it, this is his reasoning. He says, I take the 9-square grid specifically so that I can break the most traditional possibilities of spatial configuration. And what does he do? He announces that the only way to break it is at the end, when all of his formal operations are completed, that a very diagonal space is produced in the house, which breaks how one experiences the formal possibilities of a 9-square grid while using one of those. So it's not that rigid. It doesn't have to be as rigid as it has been for the last whatever 300-400 years at least. In my case here, what I'm doing is I'm simply putting a plane inside, or if you like, on the left is a axonometric drawing. I am, let's say, sliding the paper plane that the axonometric was drawn on away from the drawing to see what imprint it has on it. So you could say there's an axonometric drawing and you split the paper in half like a sticker, and you peel it off and you see an imprint. And that seems to be, of course, I'm also extruding it in 3D then, but that seems to be a kind of a configuration captured like a screenshot of that diagonal that he claims has been produced in the architecture. And if you move a little bit through that diagonal space, you can capture a bunch of different kinds of imprints that could be used later. Obviously, I am using them later. And then there is the possibility of testing 2 diagonals, as you can see in the diagram in the center. Just a twisted diagonal which cuts through in one direction at the top and another in the bottom. And then there are, this is the part where this is pure speculation. It's a kind of test, among other tests, to see if this method of looking at these projects can be productive at all, and using techniques or operations here that are used quite commonly in architectural design. So in this case, it's a kind of adjacency and stacking problem where we can see different scalar operations can produce different silhouettes, different symmetries. In the other, the same objects are scale matched without a reference, where it's more of a producing volume project, but it all has these familiar architectural elements where you can see a little bit of a staircase, you can see a little bit of what's called a shaft. And of course, if you take it to some crazy limits, things start to look pretty funky. But there is something of value here that I find worth a second degree of analysis at this point. When something like this is produced, what exactly is happening when these forms are put together through usual traditional architectural operations, and what kind of pochés are generated, basically, what kind of masses and voids and what kind of relationships are generated. And then comes, this is another project, but the line of work is still the same, where in this case, Eisenman uses a village street grid and uses a proxy form of a shell to subtract that that profile, that figure out of the shell, and then place it on the site, blend it with the ground, and maintain the poché, the thickness, and find ways to nest blocks within it that produces a different kind of a quality to the work. And so that's the procedure that I derived. I arrived at this conclusion as to how this was done. And this analysis then leads to saying that that it's possible to use one object instead of multiple different objects that are different because of the point or the plane at which they were subtracted. Instead, we could use one object and merge or populate it with its own kind, which would be something like this. So something on the right is basically one big object, the twisted diagonal, populated with its own piece, but at 3 different scales. And this is a sort of, the point of this operation to me personally has more to do with trying to look for a sense of a critical mass, something that would say that this is where a differentiated silhouette as well as a mass-void relationship can be observed. I think. Sorry. And the animation, it moves away simply because there's the idea of a silhouette, of voids being populated, masses being populated, and it's not really, I have no intentions of making a building that looks like that, but yeah, this is basically the idea, to have some kind of a sense of a critical mass at which a form completely deviates from what it was, and then may be something else, although it is populated by its own sort of family of pieces. And then again, for further analysis, to take one of these forms and to maybe cut them for floor distributions, or to think about ideas of subdivision, or to think about any kind of articulation. Notice there is no introduction of a ground plane or a context of any kind. So these are sort of isolated lab sort of experiments that I do with this kind of formal mining. And then it's also possible to forget about populating a existing geometry, but to take a sort of virtual plane and populate 3 different scales of the same piece and analyze it just for its mass void relations, or its shadow qualities, or its depths. And these are kind of 3 major lines of analysis that I go through. And then this one again would be a kind of a combination of such operations, where this is also my last slide, where it gets pretty funky and pretty mixed up, but I think this becomes the ground for more analysis of whatever has been mined. And I see it, all of these is more of a idea of setting up a method than the specifics of any of these projects or any of these pieces that are derived from these projects. It's just a plain cutting it through in two different orthographic projections. I wouldn't even call them plan or section. All right, that was it. Thank you. Do I have to do something? Stop share. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, it's the communication from Canan Colaço and Zeynep Mennan, upgrading participation through computational thinking in architecture.
Hello again. My name is Canan Colaço. I am an associate researcher in STAR, and today I will present this paper is related to a part of my PhD thesis that I completed at Middle East Technical University under the supervision of Professor Dr. Zeynep Mennan. And she's also connected to us via Skype for the presentation. So share screen. Share. Okay. Okay, I hope the presentation is visible to everyone. This paper traces intersection and convergence of participation and computation in architectural design. The origins of user participation and involving users in the design process is usually associated, and its origin is usually associated to Design Participation Conference, which was Design Research Society's 1971 conference. And this conference brought researchers with the aim of increasing users' role in the design process and blurring the distinction between a designer and the user. The outcomes of the conference was highlighting some topics that are do-it-yourself, design democratization, adaptable environment, user responsiveness, and personalization of the architectural discourse. According to new design methods and models were proposed by the contributors of this conference for a reorientation of knowledge during design process between stakeholders. Some participants of the design participation conference included people who were also pioneering computational design research track. These important names are some of them are Charles Eastman, Yona Friedman, Nikolaos Negroponte, William Mitchell, and Christopher Jones. This thread of user participation in architectural design, which originated in the design method movements, formed the alliance between participation and computation. However, not all the architects that were working on user participation were involved in computation and design methods movements. For example, Habrican and Walter Siegel were working on design participation during 70s and 80s, and they were looking to the participation from a different perspective than design methods movement. Habrican proposed a participatory design system, which he called it supports. And this system aimed to allow users to have meaningful contribution and participation in the design of their own houses. This structure is defined by architect through a given field of relationships and rules which govern them. It consists of a support and infill system, where infill are the parts chosen by the inhabitants. The inhabitants could decide on the size and location of the structures within the defined rules and defined framework by the architect. In late 70s, Walter Siegel was commissioned to lead some self-built houses in South London. 27 plots were given to families to design and construct their own homes. However, this didn't mean they could randomly design their own houses. Walter Siegel was assigned to develop a system that will lead these self-builders, and he laid the set of principles to guide them. He developed an adaptable timber frame housing method. These houses were self-designed and self-built, but they are not random. They all contribute to a meaningful contribution in whole. In this process, the role of the architect Walter Siegel was lay the rules of the design, not design the final form and final houses. And in the later years, this pioneering work continued to develop by renowned labs and renowned of people that have been working on computation. In 2004, MIT Research Lab Open Building Alliance studied computational models and physical realization of the ideas of Habrican. Similar to the support and infill system of Habrican, Open Source Building Alliance also suggested the separation of building into a chassis and infill system. In their system, chassis is not only the structure, but it also provides a mechanical and electrical systems, where the infill provides the mass customized modules. Similar to Habrican supports, the open source building model offers a communication platform between users and designers in order to offer the users personalized design solutions. In 1982, John Fraser and his team realized an interactive machine-readable modeling kit for the computation of Siegel method. The model enabled self-designers to arrange computers in the physical end model on an electric panel. Every design element is labeled so that the digital processor could automatically generate the plans of the physical model that was designed by the users. And in addition to this, the computational model could interpret the preliminary design to generate plans of the building, compute area calculations, calculate schedules for the construction, and also give three-dimensional views. By using this computational model, a self-builder with no knowledge on design and computation could design their own houses, could easily evaluate his design solutions, compare them by cost, area, and construction duration. Even though Habrican and Siegel didn't directly involve computational models for their participation, however, in the later years, the computational realization of the works of the Siegel and Habrican proved that although they didn't involve computerization themselves, their designs still inherited computational thinking. both of them designed the rules of the building system instead of the building form. And Fraser defines this new role of the architect as a designer of a genetic code. This code contains the information of the design system with elements and rules to combine them. This genotype doesn't constitute the final product, but it supplies instructions to the process of designing the phenotype, which is the final form. And rather than the architect, other actors in the design process, such as the user, generate the final form by assigning fixed values to the genotype. The discussion of the genotype-phenotype differentiation is further developed in non-standard exhibition and also in Bernard Kasch's discussion of the development of the concept of objectile. According to their definition, objectile is a new kind of technical object. It's not really an object, but rather an objectile, which is a generic, non-specific object that is no longer designed, but calculated. The pairs formed by genotype, phenotype, norm, form, object, and objectile and object all refer and contribute to the same idea. In these models, architecture authorship is split between more agents. On one side, architect as the designer of the general rules, and the other side, user as the designer of the final object. The findings of this research show that computational design thinking has been used by architects to create systems capturing their design knowledge to guide non-experts through complex design decision-making processes. This approach suggests a methodology that blurs boundaries between expert and non-expert, designer and user. Moreover, by giving auditorial right, it empowers users during the design process and marks a clear demarcation from pseudo participation. And these are the references of our work. Thank you for your attention.
Well, now we have another participation from Silvia Spolaor with a paper from her and Vítor Oliveira titled Urban Forms of Informality, Decoloniality as a Perspective for Morphological Studies.
Hi, I'm going to share my screen. Is it okay?
Yes.
Can you see the presentation, right? Yeah.
Yes. We see
Okay.
the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Okay now.
Now, yeah, okay. Nice. Okay, this is my presentation. This is a part of my PhD investigation that I'm developing at the Faculty of Engineering with the supervision of Vítor Oliveira, which is also my co-author in this article. Urban Forms of Informality and Decoloniality as a Perspective for Morphological Studies. For the introduction, I want to say that decolonial studies come from other research areas like social studies, literature, and many others. But in urban investigation and decolonial perspective, claims for the acknowledgement of the distinctive and the spontaneous practice of territorial occupation and questions the universality of modernity and development models that cannot be applied in any context, and includes plural ways of thinking space and the everyday practices of urban inhabitants in knowledge building. I just showed these two examples, like just two images that are very interesting and not so many times are part of our resources of investigation. This is a settlement in Cameroon, and this other one is in Mali. Decolonial, just a second. I can't see my whole slide, wait. Yeah, okay. Decolonial urban planning states that even if colonial times have formally finished, societies are still operated within legal, institutional, governmental, and decision-making systems that are a legacy of coloniality. And therefore, planning in practice is still colonialized. Different authors will question the applicability of these universal models of planning and the limited scope of some concepts, and will affirm the necessity of us being open to new ideas. Top-down planning initiatives based on Euro-American visions are not always capable to guide and plan all cities across the globe. So for this paper, we will focus only on the physical impact of these models of coloniality and modernity, to the point that we get to this homogenization and loss of identity. Some cities can be called really the generic city as described by Colaço. Sorry. Okay. Here, just to show some examples, this is the master plan made by foreign architects for the capital city of Abuja in Nigeria. This is the master plan, and this is what it looks like when you go on Google and check. And this is the rest of the city, how it looks like. This is Ahmedabad in India, and they make these Dolera Smart City projects. And this is what they think the city should look like. And this is actually what the city looks like. In my perspective, this is much more, much more interesting than this. And this is just another example in Mumbai. This is a typical housing solution called shawls. And this is the proposed redevelopment of those shawls in the city center. We can see already some towers around. Why we are focusing here on informal settlements? Because the most difficult part of the city to plan and control development, even though they are the main housing resources for the cities located in the global south. Of course, this has been an increasing challenge for planning theory and practice, especially because of the scale, the complexity, and the dynamic of its urban forms. It changes a lot over time. And urban form becomes the less studied dimension of informal settlements. Many authors will focus on different dimensions, like social or economic dimensions. In these investigations, mainly then inspired by the theoretical inputs in urban morphological and decolonial studies, but also from inspired by empirical investigations, trying to fill in the gaps in methodological tools for decolonial research and in morphological parameters to study urban informal settlements. And bearing in mind the relevance of understanding these different local, economic, historic, cultural, and social characteristics of the settlements, and worried about a new agenda for urban studies and planning that should include a critical perspective that cares for the value of local experiences and the different modes of living. The lenses of decoloniality and morphological tools are then proposed to do this. If we take urban morphology as a tool for planning, it has a structural character. So mainly any city in the world is composed by streets, squares, street blocks, plots, and buildings. The applicability is shown by different studies on research lines, on comparative studies, and also because of the dissemination of morphological studies across the globe. However, few studies on informal settlements and lesser contributions can be seen from the global south in between the different authors publishing in urban morphology. Its main fundamental principles we'll talk about the origins, the process of transformation, the special features, and the special organization of a determined human settlement. Urban morphology has a variety of analytical tools, and it has many possibilities for adaptation according to the different contexts to understand the special organizations, relations, and patterns. Of course, it's going to depend on the availability of resources to conduct an accurate analysis, this meaning specifically data. There are three main approaches to urban form. I'm not going very deep into this, but just to so we can have a notion of that for those who doesn't know. The historical geographical approach is based mainly on the morphogenetic characteristics of urban settlements, main geographic, spatial, and built features of a certain space. The main concepts here are the morphological regions and the fringe belts. Space syntax, maybe more people here know more about it. So basically based on space and movement, and the main concept being the spatial configuration. The process typological approach is based on the analysis of tissues and building types over time. The main concepts here could be polarities, roots, and type and typological process. However, most morphological studies using those approaches are based on geographical contexts with long established urban forms and precise property delimitations. In this case, the lack of data in different contexts will hamper morphological analysis, and analytical methods are always culturally rooted and therefore not universal. If we take, for example, the historical geographical approach that's based on a British tradition and the process typological approach based in an Italian tradition, of course, if we want to apply this in a different context, we're going to have to adapt and think about the resources we're going to have for this research. Therefore, methodological additions and adaptations become necessary to study specifically informal settlements. Some authors already have come up with different ideas and solutions for that. For example, these two authors will expand some analytical factors, and they're going to state the importance of observing non-spatial factors with physical impact. For example, legislation and citizenship situations, for example, situational factors that are going to talk about the location and the price in between center and periphery, site locations, for example, the impact of topography, and other, like, for example, building on water or something like that. The ambiguities of ownership that in this case are very important because of the thresholds between private and public space can be very fluid. And lastly, about building typology that can vary over tenure security. For example, if a person knows that they can have that house for a longer time, they're going to invest on a more resistant solution over time. For example, bricks over tarpaulin or wood. Besides the space, there is the importance of traditional knowledge and cultural identity. For example, how different cultural and religious values and social relationships might change the way urban forms and its transformation are studied and interpreted. And also from the previous studies on urban forms, for this article, we have selected 5 authors, and here I'm just gonna talk about one of them. For example, Viana, who is in the audience, I think. He explores the city of Maputo, and of course, these different authors are gonna explore different concepts, and then they're gonna give different contributions. But in the case of Viana, he uses different approaches, and he's going to explore the relationship between urban forms and activities, and how the urban form can change in a dynamic way during the day, during the night, during different activities, and how top-down and bottom-up initiatives can be captured by this analysis. They show different ways to explore morphological concepts. So the different methodological contributions for future research that we can get from this are the essential structural elements to be analyzed in relation to their specific contexts, and the configuration of streets that can perform a high connectivity profile in the case of informal settlements, and also highlight the importance of the public space as a space of livability and work. Other non-spatial factors might include cultural and symbolic values. For example, Whitehand and Gu in this analysis of the city of Pingyao in China are going to show how Feng Shui could influence the planning standards and guidelines for the city. In this case, in a settlement in Cape Town, they analyze how housing tenure and land ownership negotiations and mediations could be difficult if you don't understand the main epistemological and axiological standpoints of the place. And also in the Kibera settlement in Nairobi, how the citizenship status can difficult land access because of the Nubians that don't have citizenship of the country. In the end, I showed this table synthesis showing the different approaches, the different concepts the different difficulties and adaptations that are need to use those concepts, and then how we could improve informality studies. So for example, if we take into consideration the historical geographical approach and how morphological regionalization and fringe belts could be applied, it's important to observe the lack of proper cadastral maps. So we don't have the structure of the plots, for example, and we don't have the property ownership standards, and we have to observe the time frame of the transformation. And then how they could improve informal studies is because they can define boundaries for transformation and master plan guidelines, and also establish evolution patterns throughout time to predict growth. So as conclusions, it was possible to demonstrate the possibility of adding different methodological actions. So we could include knowledge on these bottom-up initiatives from an economic point of view. Sorry. From this economic point of view, solutions based on the way people live might come up from this analysis. For example, like minor infrastructure intervention can improve the whole system, and how morphological contributions can be essential to improve auto construction standards. And for the future, that's what I'm doing right now on my PhD thesis, to investigate how the fringe belt concepts might relate to informal settlements. And that's it. Thank you.
You're muted.
Well, I may introduce again, please, again, Mennan with a paper with the title Collaboration of Visual Intelligence between Human and Machine Actors in Design Processes.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so let me talk about myself briefly. I'm a research assistant and teaching assistant in the Middle East Technical University in the Department of Architecture under supervision of Professor Dr. Zeynep Mennan as Canan herself. I'm going to present my a part of my PhD research to the current. I'm a PhD candidate. So I'll try to skip the preliminaries first. So this is background. Basically, I'm going to go through this quickly. The motive of my research starts from design as a sensory practice. So for machine agents to be included in these sensory practices, we need to understand these features. And vision is commonly favored among sensory inputs because we can, there are prospects provided by abstraction, diagrammatical thinking, sense making within mental catalogs. So this is rather based on our personal histories in the built environment, and we're using them as spatial intelligence, as Leon van Schaik has provided us with in a theoretical framework. They establish conceptual understandings of design organization. So new prospects in visual intelligence are provided with the inclusion of machinic actors. So machine learning and neural networks take the most of the load in these cases. And I am a firm believer of a collective visual intelligence between human and machinic actors. So the state of the art presents us with a wide spectrum of methods of visual problem solving, spanning from the more formal to more intuitive, from informed decision making and generation over meticulously collected and cataloged sets of data. This is machine learning, to mere intuitive tasks, marks over a sketch. So we utilize them all. And visual intelligence relies heavily on subjective knowledge and past experiences. So rather to say it is our individual histories, as I mentioned in the previous slide. The difficulty of combining intuitive and formal reasoning for visual problems. There are two factors. Intuitive reasoning relates more to the already possessed sensory systems, our eyes and our mental catalogs. And intuitive decisions are fast and mostly accurate. This is with regards to Daniel Kahneman's and Herbert Simon's assertions on intuition. So we cannot discard intuition altogether for the sake of formal consistencies, for the sake of computability, basically. Sorry. And so the visual reasoning therefore spans a variety of faculties, mental catalogs and categories, aesthetical or cultural preferences, geometry and geometrical rules, shape grammars, symbolic thinking, interpretation, representation, abstraction, diagrammatical thinking, sense making, to cite a few. But with machine learning, all visual faculties and all of these faculties are embedded into the action of creating a data set. So we are borrowing from past decisions when we are combining a data set for training. And for me, I observe a shift in the use of visual intelligence, a shift from singular visual solutions to multiplicity, and a shift to more probabilistic approaches rather than fixity. So we can test multiple visual solutions synchronically due to inclusion of machinic actors in our design processes. I really love the term, the sense of order. I have inherited it from Ernst Gombrich. So there's a correlation between perceptual structures and conceptual structures. Namely, there's a correlation between collection and interpretation of visual information. So what we see is abstracted in our minds for fast processing, and it is included into mental catalogs through the questions of what and where. And this is the theory of Gombrich. For neural networks, this correlation is modifiable and extensible. Why? Because we can combine different data sets and we can train the machinic actor for different senses of orders. And for natural elements, it's hard-coded in the individual history of the being, as well as the biological constraints and biological sensory structures, our eyes and our visual processing systems. These are extensively explained in the paper itself, so I'm not going to bore you with these. I'm just going through with it. And through neural networks, as I've stated before, custom senses of orders are possible. And they're expanding our ways of our own inherent order without any constraints. So up to this point, I have explained the background in the paper, which is theoretically explained extensively. And now I'm going to go into more interesting parts in my concern. Three methods affect the training processes the most, especially in the context of machine learning: the training data. And the main question here is, how consistent is the data set? So a consistent data sets allows us to train a machinic actor in a more consistent way. So the machine has higher accuracy in discrimination and in generation. The second is the configuration of the neural network. How do we determine the numbers of neurons, layers, and activation functions? This is, for me, actually is a part of statistics. I mean, most of the people are triggered when people say that machine learning is advanced statistical regression, but I am still a firm believer of it. I have taken numbers of courses in Informatics Institute, in Matthew, and Cognitive Science Department. So nothing has changed my paradigm of it so far. Third problem is the learning prospect function. So how do we modify the progress of the neural network itself? So we want to see how it learns and how it forgets about things so that we don't overfit. Overfitting is a very big problem in the context of neural networks. These questions induce the visual problem solving in the scope of machine learning that I found. So the challenges and the countermeasures. Regarding the three challenges, a collection of a consistent data set, how to cope with dirty data. So this actually is the most interesting part to my research. I want to be able to collect any type of information and include it into my data set, but I want the model to be able to assess these features and to turn a blind eye on dirty data if needed. But if it is not needed, I want it to embrace this dirty data and create intuitive outcomes. The second is the balance of performance and level of visual detailing. So we are actually capable of, as humans, of consuming a lot of visual information and creating abstractions from it, so that we would love the machine to have that capability of assessing detail in visual compositions. The third, it becomes the balancing of learning and unlearning, which I have mentioned in the previous slide, but technically deep convolutional generative adversarial networks, shortly as the CGANs, are highly unstable and quickly get stuck at an unlearning loop. So they just, if you don't modify the learning rate, they can just forget about everything, and then they just don't stop getting trained altogether. These problems are addressed all together synchronically within the training of a neural network. Sorry. The basic composition for my proposal for an unsupervised learning is that I have created a web crawler. I give keywords to it to search through the internet, Google Images mainly, to collect all relevant images. But this is a very dirty data. It consists of, obviously, of building photographs, but as well as book covers, architect portraits, some text about it, the keyword, PDFs, all sorts of things. So I actually have included these in the library for the training, the data set. Then there is this preprocessor, which is responsible for eliminating corrupt images and then cataloging and resizing all valid images. So we need to prepare the images for training, but it doesn't eliminate the dirty data, which is a challenge in itself. So I want to be able to take any keyword and do a Google search about it and be able to just supply my model with just this data and to be work with it. So this is the main challenge in this unsupervised learning experience. And there's this DCGAN, which consists of two neural networks, a discriminator and a generator. The discriminator validates the generated image, and the generator obviously generates the image. The learning activation function is custom in the latest stage, and the layers are mostly composed of deep convolutions, and they are activated by leaky values. These are statistical information and technical information about it. For the ones that are acquainted with the machine learning, they know what exactly I mean, but they are functions that activate a neuron and then just establish the learning and remembering experience. So a training is a very exclusive process, I must say. You start with training, I don't know, a number of models. So I'm showing you the initial state and the 23rd state. thank God I just changed the learning algorithm at the 23rd model because I was running out of letters. So the first is Alfred with the first letter of A, and then the 23rd is the Winston, and that's why I was just having trouble. So the first model just got stuck at an unlearning loop, just forgot everything and just created noise. At the 23rd iteration, after various new network configurations, it was a very slow learning process, very inefficient in generating details. It was just able to generate silhouettes with the landscape order. But the successful training was Lisa. Lisa was the 12th model in after I started creating custom learning algorithms. So here is the training process for you. You will see eventually it starts to generate meaningful urban environments supplied with random noise. You can even see some human figures here if you can see my cursor. And you can see at this stage it is overfitting. So it started to learn and the level of detail is not increasing. One very weird example is this. It's also showing some stock photo tags. I cannot show it here, but in the more detailed bit, it becomes, it actually shows Shutterstock. So the next bit. So what I found is that this is also slow in learning, but very fast in generation. After 500 epochs of training, this took like 3 days of training under Google's cloud training library. So it was a very intensive process. It is good in generating high resolution images, but still they are kind of like dreams. The learning algorithm has decreased the unlearning rate and higher learning rate. So it is obviously prone to overfitting, an issue that I'm still trying to overcome. My conclusions to this point are, again, threefold. The collection of a consistent data set is addressed as a dirty data set can be compensated by a slow learning rate in DC GANs. If you reduce the learning rate speed, a slow learning, you can work with a dirty data set. So you can actually just boot up your system and just go with a lot of data that you found on the internet without any supervision, and it just works. The balancing of the performance and the level of visual detail during training, the conventional pyramid configuration of DC GANs. Well, there's this pyramid configuration. The discriminator starts with a low resolution and starts assessing details, and then the network widens. The generative model takes that level of detail and composes it into a single image. So that's the pyramid. 2 pyramids together. But wider networks for higher detail rate are favorable. That comes with a cost. The training takes too long. Balancing the learning and unlearning rate. Reducing unlearning rate is almost mandatory, but this results in a rapid overfitting of the discriminator with regards to the generator. So machine learning for design problems and visual problems is, again, an optimization feature and requires abstraction capabilities from humans. So the future tracks, and this will conclude my presentation. Instead of supplying the generator with random noise, the generator starts with random noise, it's fed with random noise, and it starts to shape that random noise into what is meaningful. It is possible to supply an abstract sketch, like 4 or 5 lines indicating a perspective. That would speed up the process. This is the future experiment. But up to this point, I think this experiment confirms a collective visual intelligence is possible that is initiated by human input and accelerated and multiplied by the machining actor. So we can just generate with the same sketch 16 types of different random noises and different facades for this instance, basically, and a custom and domain specific sense of order. For this, it's a modernist facade generator, and the keywords for search for modernist architecture embedded in the machinic actor. So its whole world, its whole individual history becomes modernist facades. But abstraction and visual reasoning is induced by human actors. So the idea of authorship still belongs to the human actor, but augmented, the design process and visual problem solving is augmented by the machinic actor. So this is my theory, basically, and it's extensively explained in the paper as well, but I wanted to show you how the training of the machinic actor and the experience of that was in this paper, in this presentation. And here are my references. There are a bunch. And thank you for listening.
Well, thank you. Now we have the last presentation in this session from Alexandros Peteinarelis and Nikolaos Patsavos, and the title is Digital Doxiadis, Parametric Thinking for Human Settlements. Please.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Alexandros Peteinarelis, and today, together with Nikos Patsavos, we will present the paper Digital Doxiadis, Parametric Thinking for Human Settlements.
Can you see the screen? The screen sharing? Hello?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
You can proceed.
Aspra spitya means white houses. Doxiadis, only European example of complete realization of his acoustics theory, was originally planned and constructed between 1961 and 1964 for French aluminium company Peteinarelis and its Greek subsidiary Aluminium of Greece. The settlement is a paradigmatic application of Doxiadis' anthropocentric attempt to revive the ancient Greek city in the context of radical critique to modern planning and architecture and the challenges of the future. It was designed for a projected population of 5,000, proposing 1,100 dwellings for recruited aluminium plant workers, engineering, and administrative staff. I think you are watching the screen I should be watching while presenting, and not the one with the slide only. Is it true?
Yes.
No, it's the slide. I think it's right.
Do
you see also the text?
No.
Oh.
I mean, the one I'm reading.
No.
Oh.
No, we are 2 slides behind already.
Everything seems fine.
Okay.
Please proceed.
Yeah. After the initial design and construction by Doxiadis Associates, the international firm managed by Konstantinos Doxiadis, 2 incompatible expansions and modifications followed by 3 other architects. The expansions introduced modern high-rise buildings, drawing from and cultivating the Athenian suburban lifestyle. At any case, the settlement and the factory it serves should be viewed as an interplaying assemblage, both operating in conjunction while also preserving their singularity. Following the first 50 years of their systemic evolution, Aspra Spitya and Aluminium of Greece are now facing a series of challenges The company, having lost its initial connection with Pessinet and due to its relatively small size, is facing the risk of isolation. Deindustrialization in the Western world raises the question of a new production paradigm allowing vertical and horizontal integrated development. Therefore, Aspra Spitia are at risk of becoming an obsolete and unmanageable monument of 20th century industrial heritage. In resolving this, the research team reflected on a strategic recodification of its functional and role and organization, which would invest in its inherent characteristics and the following assets: local knowledge on aluminium, emblematic and functional spatial infrastructure, unique design with emphasis on public space needed for social interaction, extensive and specialized available national human resources. In short, Aspra Spitia possess the fundamental spatial social expertise and productive attributes of what the economist Michael Porter has described as a cluster, a geographic concentration, a network of interconnected businesses, suppliers, and associated institutions in a particular field. This concept aligns with both the ecumenopolis model and Doxiadis' conceptualization of networks since the 1960s. This was the hypothesis further examined in the third relative workshop discussed in the paper. The workshop curriculum had to respond to the following challenges: to fulfill the research agenda objectives with the provided algorithm implementation, to suggest as to offer computational thinking understanding, as Senske would suggest, thereby participants would grasp the underlying logic of the processes taking place in the provided design tool, and to present the preliminary research findings and previous workshop results as point of departure for the design of new master plans.
Now, to present some relevant research work about urban parametric design methods and systems, we have Guerrero et al. Arguing that the design of urban plans considers decisions beyond their formal characteristics. They present with their research an urban design tool with parametric features in interplay with fixed and predefined urban form and use elements. Thus, they confront the whole process as a dynamic design system, steering away from static design of specific layouts towards a continuous exploration of informed design solutions derived from parameter adjustments. Along this direction, they opt to conduct the design investigation and decision-making processes simultaneously. Similarly, Pitts and Luther also establish an updating design feedback loop, where ideas are tested and validated up to the point the specific solution can be promoted to the next level of a more detailed design phase. So in this slide, we are correlating the contemporary urban design data-driven approaches of Doxiadis that already expressed in his early analytical approach towards the design process. So the grasshopper definition we implemented for the digital Doxiadis workshop attempts to parameterize the diagnosed dynamics of Aspra Spitia settlement. The main computational research focus was to examine how its functional evolution, aligned with Doxiadis' initial master plan design intent and systemic thought, can be embedded in a parametric model, anticipating to go beyond quasi-representational parametric models into an informed urban design system and decision-making tool.
For this study, Grasshopper 3D graphic algorithm editor for Rhino 3D modeler was selected for the design tool implementation. 3 plugins were selected: Human UI for the creation of custom user interfaces, Human for on-screen numerical and geometry data display in urban network analysis toolbox, UNA, for Rhino, for spatial accessibility and pedestrian flow along spatial networks analysis. The design tool and method considered the following properties and goals. The algorithm implementation had to accommodate participants of variable expertise, skills, and understanding of urban design concepts and programming, considering Doxiadis' plan, public space potentialities, The workshop design tool considers the first original plan by his office as a hard constraint and attempts to alter the settlement only in the areas of later modifications through scale and size parameters that create urban gradients of structures and place. In line with Doxiadis' framework of the Dinapolis, calling for linearly expandable rectangular dwelling plans, the design tool attempts to reproduce the existing Doxiadis housing units layout and building typologies. As Porter emphasizes, it is human agency that binds clusters together and provides a social glue that facilitates their competitive benefits. In the new plan, a square of implicit knowledge, SOK, is predicted. This neo-Doxiadic Gothic square, as he would call it, is where knowledge and current innovation concepts will be exchanged outside the working spaces and is a key urban attribute for design iterations. The design tool aims to accommodate evolving master plan variations, which can be assessed through fitting target data values. Therefore, the design process must be supported by visual interfaces that offer spatial and numerical updates.
Now, early from the workshop design process, the organizing team adopted the definition of design as a negotiation between problem and solution through the processes of analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, as discussed by Lawson in relevant articles. The designer pursues to generate a matching problem-solution pair through a co-evolution of the problem and the solution. So we thought that we would challenge the participants to apply this iterative bidirectional process and method. Analysis as the first step considers the provided preliminary research findings to form design questions regarding the future of the settlement. The analysis step is the groundwork for the formulation of the working vector master file that can be edited at any time, matching alternating design intents. Participants would alternate it as they think it should. Design begins with strategy diagrams that examine the social and spatial settlement function. Then, target metrics are specified to resonate with the design intent and the working master file. Parameters are referenced to the design tool. We have persistent layers containing non-editable geometry from the original Doxiadis' master plan, which would not be changed along the design process, and dynamic layers that are utilized for the design of new urban blocks, buildings, and road networks. The already mentioned squares of implicit knowledge are the main urban attribute that transforms the settlement and creates cluster districts. Urban blocks in user-given proximity to the square, the range of the district, are populated with three types of buildings. Can we move to the next slide, please? We have cluster expert buildings where aluminum research and development takes place. Cluster 1 type buildings for pertinent to the aluminum research and applied technologies industry experts. Cluster type 2 buildings for short-term dwellings and cluster experts and visitors. And then outside the cluster range are allocated public use buildings and type 3 long-term dwellings to complete the settlement master plan and its private and social function. The evaluation step examines the proposed solutions assessing the chosen positions of the cluster districts in reference to each other and to urban amenities. The master plans are evaluated in time with urban network analysis features, analyzing the daily routine of the settlement during rush hours and leisure time, pedestrian and vehicle accessibility from social to private destination, and working places are quantified to pinpoint either areas of overcrowding or road network bottlenecks, either searching for secluded or poorly accessible regions. Lastly, to complete the evaluation process, we have a reflection on density indicators, where design aspirations and strategies are validated or reconsidered according to the minimum or maximum metrics that every case initially sets as targets and priority. The workflow is supported by an interface layout as shown in this slide that has three working rhino views, a legend view, and the custom user interface that depicts data and changes that are happening along the design process. The master plan legend can be saved at any time as a raster file. The middle stacked rhino views are the working views where we can, in orthographic views, edit the position of the square the points that generate the squares of implicit knowledge after the designer sets their number and position. For each point that generates those squares, the design tool calculates the proximity to a user-defined number of urban blocks. We can have 4 or more or less blocks that are associated with the main with the biggest block found near the origin point of the square. To create an open space for this square, a slider defines the distance that every sorted block, except the largest, will shrink parallel to its edge closest to the point of generating those squares. The cluster district range is defined by the radius of a circle. Now, to position and size the units, each block curve is exploded to evaluate its segments according to their direction. East and west facing segments are used for the size grouping of blocks, as discussed earlier. And the definition to complete the design process deals and resolves from yards and back alleys and uses self-intersections or end with block outlines to remove any offending geometries. And thus we can have a clean master plan result to be baked in Rhino for further edit, evaluate as already discussed, and finalize each design iteration.
The workshop outputs in terms of the parameters already described are organized in 2 sets. How did each team address the provided analytical data? How did participants adopt to the design tool and the suggested design method? How did they conceptualize into diagrams their design intentions? How did this evolve through the feedback of the design tool, the evaluation tools and processes into proposal master plans eventually? Alexa.
Yes, to discuss the results of the workshop, along with the culture that we had during the process of studying and applying solutions, and the method application, of course, for each team. The first phase of the workshop allowed the time needed for every team to build their cohesion, working on the same shared data of the preliminary research, and in line with the common toolkit and other references we gave each team. Considered together, the outputs are varying in the ways they have used the method and design tools. That was a nice surprise for us that we organized the workshop, whereas one would expect that the teams would limit themselves in fewer aspects of the case studies attributes for every solution suggested. The workshop group agreed that in the range of possibilities revealed in this attempt to parameterize the compositional logic and evolution of this historical 20th century urban heritage asset, they found that the design tool offered great flexibility to confront such a complex question and study. The second issue that was raised mostly by us, the tutors and the organizers of the workshop, was that participants did not share the overall analysis, synthesis, and evaluation bidirectional process as clearly as we would need and wished for. Another thing that we could point out was that each team visualized their work in a way that along the process they asked recourse to close the representation techniques, attempting to communicate their output as a finalized proposal and not as a work in progress piece of research that goes along with previous argument. Now, one interesting aspect of the whole process was that in the end of the workshop, one of the students remarked he would expect a parametric design seminar to open up an unimagined array of possible forms and structures. In this, the research team shared openly this position that parametric design and along its history and course nowadays is asked to contribute to the continuity of architectural evolution and not just propagate new species of architectural life forms, although we do understand the importance of such endeavors.
Discussing further the results and the workshop experience, as Picon and Zarzyski would argue, computer-aided design cannot be an endless exploration of potentialities. Instead, computational processes ought to augment the decision made in logic. The design outcomes show that every team managed to envision design strategies and to deliver pertinent master plans, which were able to defend through the presentation of a series of decisions supported by the data design interplay. The latter raises the question of the background needed for architects to be in position to apply formal methods mediated by data. Besides this distancing from stringent formalism, architects need to build a critical awareness regarding data collection, analysis, and application in order to identify and understand the consequences of their design proposals. Discussing further the results in the workshop experience, it can be argued that participants could early identify with and apply geometric transformations, followed by an understanding and, in most cases, application of the associative capability offered by parametric modeling. Perspective obstacles became evident when each team was challenged to combine design aspirations with qualitative and quantitative computational processes.
And to conclude, in Aspraspitya, Doxiadis associates have implemented the prototype industrial settlement, which in external organization has the potential of international node. A key asset of the Doxiadis associates plan was the care for a spatial organization unfolding at various planning and design scales. In revisiting such a pioneering analysis based on data-driven anthropocentric acoustics, our research design agenda discussed in this paper, in the light of contemporary design tools and cluster development theory, supports that it is possible what could or would remain a small and geographically isolated community may rise as a key regional agent. Pervasive social elements of the new cluster study defined the design research principles. In this way, the original agenda was implemented by means of the provided algorithm and design tool, the latter being the mediator between the settlement's past and its projected futures. Also here, an obvious future research could be going beyond the procedural process as it was discussed and presented in these slides and work with real-time agents that self-organize along given directions and according to some aims.
We would like to acknowledge all workshop participants already mentioned in one of the slides, as well as our colleagues Sokratis Yanoudis and Vasilis Tesmetsis, if not also the continued support by Aluminium of Greece, who actually possesses the problem we are trying to study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, we went by the 15 minutes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now we are beginning the debate. I ask if anyone wants to make any question. Okay.
From here or maybe
Near the microphone.
I would like to ask you the first author. I don't. Joanna. I think I don't understand completely your point. You talk about the genetics and the phenotypes, and you make a strength on that there is different patterns in solutions designed by users and the solutions when authors have a different intervention or more intervention, and I'm not completely sure about it because in other cases, for instance, in the case that I analyzed, there are some buildings that are designed by architects and others by constructors. The patterns are quite similar. There are some studies like the one from my supervisor, Isabel Raposo, Casas de Sonhos. I don't know if you know the book about the migrants, the Portuguese migrants in France, how they built their houses in Portugal, where the users take an important part of the design, or the result is very dependent on the users, and in some of these houses are have an architect or another technician, and the results could be quite similar. So maybe I don't understand your point about the patterns or the metaphor with the genetics and the phenotypes.
If you can come a little closer.
I can make a similar analogy. I think also, parametric design, parametric design tools. So in parametric design, what the architect design is a parametric model. And then his role finishes at this point, and he gives this model, who could give this model to someone else. And by playing with the parameters of the object, another type of author creates the final form. So I started my research to find what type of things we can learn from computational design to separate from participation and pseudo-participation, because many people talk about participation, but in architectural design process really involving users, in the conceptual design phase is very limited. And has this very problematic as well. So I constructed my research from computational design, what we could bring to participatory design.
But is it a real difference between the genetic and the phenotype? I think that terminology came from another author, but in your opinion?
Yes, I think we first used the thing used in architecture, John Fraser, which he separates phenotype and genotype. So like, you can think it about like this. So parametric model is the genes, which has the rules. I don't know if you know for example, in a table designed parametrically, it's in Grasshopper. The values are in Grasshopper. Everything is Grasshopper. Is the genetic combination of that project, and you give this Grasshopper model to a user, someone passing from the street, and he plays with the colors, with the length, he plays with the parameters, but he plays with the parameters within within what you have defined in your parametric model.
Okay, with the values. No,
so, but he, for example, the genes we all have, genes that
our eye color, and the values.
But in the end, you have blue eyes, I have brown eyes, because of the thing. But all the genetic combination of all eyes are the same code. But what then it's filled with the final object, the color of your eyes is changing with what your parents gave to you and what my parents gave to me. It's also like that. There's one model that has the rules designed by the architect, and there is the final object that is characterized by the customization of the users.
I think you said, what you said is the architect makes controls the participation and a strong, because David's question was very important. Experience in Portugal of auto architectural design is not very good. And the expertise or skills of the common people in architectural thinking and capacities for design, well, we must put that in question. So the architect, well, engineers don't have participatory from the user. Doctors, they don't have also, it's another kind of participation. Why architects would allow the common people that don't have the expertise in in what the architect knows, why would he deliver that capacity to?
I think this is a very important point. Also, in yesterday we saw in Sarah's presentation that in Oliveira houses, if we leave all the users to do whatever they want, and then we come up with okay, on one hand, now the technologies we all welcome participation and user involvement. But in reality, if we give user the full flexibility to change what they want in their houses, maybe if they demolish a structural wall, we could even make the whole house collapse. So I think this is a very important dilemma and important question where all the people involved in participation comes up with. And it's, I think, the user, the extent where the user is gonna involved in the design is a very, there is no answer. It depends on the size of the project, size of the effect that the participation would cause. It's interesting, it's very current dilemma of the participatory design.
Okay, other questions?
I think that architects didn't arrive yet to any solution, then a clear solution to that topic of participation or co-design. So there are lots of studies on that. But then if we pose the question, I think that architects still don't know exactly what they want. Yeah, because they want to allow participation, but then they also are against some type of participation.
There is a paradox on that.
Yeah, exactly. So should we make some control into the participation? If you talk to a sociologist or to a psychologist or to a philosopher, why do you want to control? Buildings are of people, buildings are of the city. So then our claim is not very understandable by other professions that are not us. So I think that the main issue here is for architects to find a way to nevertheless maintain the quality of architecture, but to, I don't know if it is to explain, but also to address the needs of the inhabitants and the needs of the users. And this is very much failing in architecture, I think, for long.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
I think this is a very important topic because I think we are facing a new challenge as an architect because the architect world is changing. Has it changed in the Renaissance, when the architects get out of the workshop and sit on desks and start drawing? Now we are again rethinking the architect role, and maybe our role it's not just being sit drawing, and maybe it's programming, maybe it's start talking with people and understanding what are their needs, and maybe our profession is really in a turning point because I really think that we are on that stage.
Also, I think another interesting thing, I think most of the papers here are presented by the researchers that are doing in architecture schools. But what mostly presented here was architects making tools for people to help with their designs. And we are all here tool makers doing our grasshopper models, scripting with ArchPy, trying to implement via these technologies. So we are all here. Our role as architects are to design the tools, and we are becoming more tool makers. And
if I can say something, is that well, there is some kind of users that have a power, that have a very big power, even over architects. Is real estate, for example. Many of the constructions we see in the cities are made by real estate and not really by architects. And that's another power that must be controlled.
But they are stakeholders. They also have presence in the built environment. So what happened for long was that architects designed and that they have one stakeholder to deal with, the city council, and if there's no need of participatory design, for instance, everyone else is away from the process. So I also don't want the real estate to come to me and to the real estate give me orders, but his opinion is probably relevant to take into consideration. So indeed, we have to find out ways of doing this participatory design, including all the stakeholders, which of course in history of architecture has been tried several times and failed also, but failed also because it is very time consuming and very expensive to do all these things. Also what happened in Sal in Portugal, it was great experiences, but then for us, because the people like they hated it. Well, not all. Yeah, not all. But I know lots of colleagues, and you also know architects say, oh, good Lord, I don't want to do any participatory design for several reasons. So, but if we find in research ways of doing this participatory design by using tools that enable more diversity in a more easy way, or other processes, or by visualizing better the solutions, I think that maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just utopia, but maybe in some years or some decades, indeed people can participate and also feel more satisfied in building. And maybe if they feel more satisfied in building, I don't know, this is just an opinion, maybe if they feel more satisfied in building, they don't constantly transform in a very strange and chaotic way everything. So why do people make closed balconies? And we don't like that much, but because they need them. No, because they can, but because they need. Yeah.
Someone.
Actually, may I add something to that? I actually also I'm very suspicious of what can be the end result of an enhanced participation in design. Of course, I think that all the comments and arguments here are quite relevant in that. But on the other hand, when you have a conference on formal methods, the whole idea of formalization is actually about making everything rule-based so that anyone can apply. It's about reducing the expressionism and the individualism of the architect. So in this sense, Canan's research is a way of inquiring into where it goes. I mean, when you have this distinction between the expert and the non-expert is starting to blur, the more you formalize the methods, because it becomes applicable by non-experts as well. But of course, design-wise, aesthetic-wise, sociology-wise, of course, we can object to that. We can be for or against participation, but it's a fact that the project of formalization itself is going towards this. What do you think?
This is something that we have discussed in previous symposiums, this idea of formalizing participation, because most of the times the idea of participation is something that is almost a case-to-case story, that each situation of each project or each context of design has its own way of participation, which probably it's really what happens. But trying to formalize participation, as you were saying, trying to create rules in order to understand how participation can be overall basis that we can almost create a discipline, if you want, is something that is very challenging, and it's something that this kind of research can help towards a next step, if you want. So this is something, for me, it's kind of a very interesting topic in terms of research, because it's it needs to create a disciplinary body, if you want, because most of the time someone talks about participation is about that particular case of participation. And if we want participation to be something that is not attached to this situation or that situation, if we want to create this, if you want a mindset where participation is there obviously without having to say, look, let's do some participation process, we need to create a body here where as planning, architecture, design, building, wherever, they already have that path, that track is already there. In participation, I think we are building the track, we are walking through, we are going and building, we are doing it and learning with it, and we need to establish a point where we can say, look, okay, this is now the moment to try to understand how we can formalize this and move to another stage of participation, if you want. So I think that's maybe where you can frame the things that you were talking about regarding your research.
Well, there are other topics you can in the interventions. They were very rich. So other questions?
If there's no other questions, I would like to have this topic from the last presentation. I think that it's a quite strong punch. Parametric design is now asked to contribute to the continuity of architectural evolution and not just propagate new species of architectural life forms. This is something really cool for a discussion. So I would like to ask you what you mean by these species of architectural life forms. If you can enlighten us a little bit better, so we can perhaps discuss this more depth.
Thank you for the question. We often see parametric design and the tools we have in our arsenal to work and design with that generate many forms. Such forms were not we were not used to such forms with previous tooling we had to work with. So many research workshops, because we were talking about the workshop we organized, were purely organized around the formal exploration. We do understand the value of such an endeavor and such methods and processes of design along an examination of how we do things. But at some point, we believe that this whole process of formality and formal exploration has reached its limit because of the many outcomes we have to see. Then one wonders if we can start looking about more dynamic and more flexible processes when dealing and involving physics engines and so on and so forth, simulation, so that those formal explorations have, let's say, a background meaning to them, besides choosing parameters in a way that, okay, I like this, I like that. When it comes in the end to be, because I like it, we believe that it has reached its end. So I think that answers this.
Can I add something, please? Yes. Yeah. Just to also relate it to the project presented, because the workshop is one part of a 5 years long procedure, including also the participation of local people actually in this procedure. One part of translating into other terms your questions about how architecture can contribute now with parametric thinking into some kind of continuity of architecture in terms of a rupture or a break of a kind of messianic value, is the fact that the settlement itself, which is monument, it is characterized as a monument and it is listed by Docomomo, calls for this kind of view. We are dealing with a real problem, which has to do with how would you explore from a design and a heritage perspective an already existing monument, which we hypothesized that has the potential, looking at the kind of formal language of Doxiadis, it has the potential of being reiterated in our days using the methods, not necessarily the tools, available in our days. So in that sense, we had also to deal with a real question put forward to us. How do you deal as an architect, both from a programmatic perspective about the real function and the meaning of existence of the settlement, and on the other hand, from a kind of planning and design perspective with a real case. So we had to sort of find the right way to work in a way as Doxiadis would probably work if in his days he had the same tools available, but at the same time we had to consider as a closed case the fact that the decisions he will take and the formal language he will use will be the one we have at hand.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting topic because, again, in previous sessions, we also have this discussion about the seduction of form and somehow how that kind of seduction may blur the real goal of the process of the approach of the tool, if you want. So that's why I ask you to go on with this topic and go a little bit more on this discussion, because it's something that is always here for us to comment on.
Alexandros mentioned that we are actually presenting, okay, it's a small piece of our work on the settlement and Doxiadis, but actually we are presenting a 5 days workshop, okay? So it's a small educational experiment in that sense. In workshops, there is a culture in students that they expect to get out some very nice looking, sexy images for their portfolio. And they try to kind of use or abuse the already given code most of the times in order to produce the kind of I like it, I don't like it images that would, you know, get their position in a portfolio or a CV. We were totally opposed to that, to be honest, and not to be diplomatic about it.
Yeah, in this kind of discussion, I always remind Sarah's word about which is the problem, which is the people's problem that we have to address, and that is the $1 million question, if you want to have always in mind when approaching this kind of experience. Although I could reverse this argument and say that we need seduction also, but that's another question. That's another seduction also. But it's another discussion. Maybe
and design is about desire. It's not about needs.
Yeah. But this is a theme for another symposium, if you want.
It's the next year's topic.
Yeah, you're right. Thank
also,
you.
as the sense of belonging amongst designers that deal with parametric, let's say. This is common too.
Okay.
It is a nice topic. Thank you.
Any other question? Well, I think we'll stop this session now. We will begin in how many minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, no, but I give you 10 minutes and we'll begin.
Okay.
And we'll begin the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Not only physical
Also,
Yes, yes.
This is the main.
Yeah.
The main
We
difference
just very
with the
exactly.
with the previous.
We just put the stone on that. The keystone.